Hi, thank you so much for having me via video. As you know, I can't be there today because I'm on my maternity leave, and so I hope that giving this talk via video is okay. If not, I apologize. Since I'm not there in person to answer your questions, I very much encourage you to email me with any questions that you have, and I promise that I'll get back to you. But again, because I'm on my maternity leave, it will be a couple of months, so please be patient. As you can see, the title of my talk is How to Succeed: Voices from the Women in Chemistry Oral History Collection. Now, I'm going to assume that most of you in this room are not familiar with oral history, and that's perfectly fine. I'm going to take a couple of moments to explain what it is and how I spend the majority of my time here at the Chemical Heritage Foundation. In some ways, oral history is really nothing more than the narrated recollections of an individual. They're lengthy conversations between an interviewer and an interviewee. Now, these are not just mere ramblings of an interviewee. They really are structured conversations. And when I interview people, there are things that I'm trying to get out of an interview. I want to know how someone got interested in science, or what their experiences were like when they were in graduate school or throughout their career. Our interviews are very long. They range from about 4 to 6 hours on average, and they're usually done over 2 to 3 days. We split them up over a couple of days because it's absolutely exhausting to sit and listen to someone for that long, and it's exhausting for the interviewee to talk about themselves for that long. After the interview is conducted, we send out the audio recording for transcription, and then we at the Chemical Heritage Foundation minimally edit the transcript. We try and keep it as true as possible to the original recorded conversation. And then all materials related to that oral history, the research materials and any other materials, are housed here at the Othmer Library. The oral histories and the related materials are used by academic researchers and scholars. We're trying to get more teachers to use them and more students as well. Chemical Heritage Foundation has a long tradition of conducting oral histories. We've been doing it for over 30 years, and we've conducted over 700 oral histories, many of which are on the shelves in the library upstairs. Many of these oral histories fall into subcategories or smaller collections, some that are related to World War II and Manhattan Project science, many that are related to polymer science. A newer oral history project has been related to the Toxic Substances Control Act legislation. And we have many oral histories and ongoing projects, in fact, related to mass spectrometry. And just so you know, it's mass spectrometry that will be the subject of a new oral history online exhibit that should launch this spring. Now, throughout the years and doing all of these oral histories, CHF had been mainly concerned with the subject matter: polymers, World War II, and so on. But it came to our attention a number of years ago that we weren't really doing enough to ensure that we captured the voices of female chemists. We certainly had female interviewees, but just not that many. So in 2008, in order to rectify this problem, we launched the Women in Chemistry Oral History Project. Women's history has a long tradition of oral history. And as I said, CHF has a long tradition of oral history. And it seemed like a very good fit for us at the Chemical Heritage Foundation to be conducting these oral histories. Oral history traditionally fills in silences and voids in the historical record, giving voice to those who didn't have one. We're trying to give female scientists that voice in our own collection and in the history of chemistry and its related sciences that we're telling. Now, there was some fear in the institution itself about what these oral histories would be like. People were very concerned that they would be 6 hours of depressing stories, 6 hours of stories about isolation or marginalization, 6 hours about difficulties. There certainly are stories in these oral history discussions about isolation, marginalization, and difficulties. But overall, the Women in Chemistry oral histories are about success, about how to overcome marginalization, how to overcome difficulties. Now, the first quote that I want to share with you is from Catherine Middlecamp at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She said, "I do know a couple of things. I am not an isolated case of the uppity woman in the department, the one non-tenured woman. Often it's a wife. I mean, I'm nobody's wife. I'm somebody's wife, but many of the other women in the department, this one, that one, this one, that one, this one, are all PhD chemists who were faculty wives who were never hired in. Now they're hired as lecturers for years here. I'd say it's been a tradition. But there's Kathys all over the country. Not the same, but the same idea. There's a woman in a department that hasn't been regularized. Some of us have been eventually brought on the faculty. Others, like myself, I think will never be brought on the faculty in chemistry." I conducted Kathy's interview in 2008. Earlier this year, Kathy was brought on the faculty, and she's now a tenured professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. But, like she said, it was not in the chemistry department. She's now a tenured professor in environmental sciences. Since 2008, I've conducted 16 new women in chemistry interviews. And as you can see, they're from a sampling of locations: academia, national labs, industry, and I was lucky enough to interview Madeline Jacobs, CEO of the American Chemical Society, who here is listed in the other category. The Oral History Project began with some very broad goals, and of course the first goal was simply to add female voices into the collection. But I also wanted to understand different avenues of success. Is it different in industry, academia, and national labs? Are the tools that you use and the skills that you need to succeed different in those different locations, or is there overlap? Now, I also had to find ways to make sure that there was some focus in this broad, goal-oriented project. So I began by looking at a particular time period. I began by looking at women who started their careers in the 1970s and later. They started their careers after the founding of AWIS in 1971, the organization we're here to celebrate today, and a couple of them do talk about the importance of AWIS and related organizations. And it was also in this time period that Title IX was enacted. Title IX is something we normally think about in relation to sports, but Title IX ensured and legislated, in fact, that government funding from the NSF, NIH, and all of those places that fund science had to be equally shared between men and women. Now, if we look at all of the physical science PhDs, I've highlighted here, and I'm sorry that it's probably a little difficult to see, I've highlighted the early 1970s to show that it was also in this decade that women really began kind of their, made an uptick in the number and percentage of PhDs that they were earning in comparison to men. However, it's important to note that while this is all of the physical sciences, in chemistry, throughout the entire decade of the 1970s, on average each year, only 200 women were earning PhDs in chemistry. And that's out throughout the entire country, all universities nationwide. Now think back to a world before email and cell phones and social media. The woman, the closest woman to you, could be hundreds of miles away. You would never see that woman. You might never know that she existed. That woman could be 10 miles away, and you still might never know that she existed. The 1970s also mark chemistry departments around the country hiring their first tenure-track women as professors. Harvard and Berkeley, two of the most prestigious chemistry departments in the country, hired their first women for tenure-track positions in 1978. Now, when I began this project, I wanted to understand success. And I had an idea that success came about through some combination of mentoring, personal stories, and networks. And that's really played out as true in my conversations with women. Those words and phrases might not be used, but the meanings are there. and it's very clear that mentoring, personal stories, and networks have had a profound effect on all of the women I've interviewed. What I didn't understand when I started this project was that it was a combination of those three things that led to confident decision-making, and that confident decision-making is what really has been key to success. Donna Nelson, the first woman to earn tenure in the chemistry department at the University of Oklahoma, told me, "I just went ahead and did what I wanted, which I think is extremely important. You have to figure out what you want and then do it." She expressed this sentiment repeatedly throughout her oral history, about figuring out what she wanted, figuring out what was best for her, and simply doing that. That confidence in decision-making was key to her being successful. She emphasized that there would always be someone to judge your decisions, and you had to be confident in them, because otherwise you would second-guess yourself, and then where would you be? When she was a young postdoc in H.C. Brown's lab at Purdue University, she was his first female postdoc. She was about to have a child, and she had decided that she was going to put her son in daycare very shortly after he was born. She said there in the chemistry department was a female, not a professor, but well, I guess she was a professor, not tenure track. And she knew I was pregnant. She was an old woman, and when she heard me say that I was going to take only a week, she started in on me. She said, "You're a bad mother. You're going to be a bad mother. You can't do this." She said, "It will be horrible for your child. Your son will hate you when he gets older." She said, "You will have a completely alienated relationship, and it's going to," and oh, she kept telling me all these things that were going to happen. And I just said, "Well, thank you for telling me." Donna Nelson was confident in the decision she was making. Similarly, Judith Jordan, who I hope many of you heard speak yesterday at the Joseph Priestley Society luncheon, explained the importance of confidence. She said, "Your degree of success is directly correlated to your level of confidence that you can succeed. Not your arrogance, it's your confidence." I have to say that there have been plenty of times in my life that I have had absolutely no confidence, but I'm part Italian, Sicilian, and bravado got me through. So step number one is walk into anything with confidence. The question is, though, how do we really learn how to be confident? How do we learn all of the skills that we need to be successful? Confidence being just one of many. Now, it's easy for us to imagine and for us to think that we learn all of the skills that we need to succeed in our rigorous education, undergraduate and graduate. But most of us know that that's not necessarily true. Our education doesn't prepare us for everything that we need to be successful. Maybe we learn some of these things in graduate school, but most of us don't. And this is just a short list of some of the things we're expected to know how to do. How to allocate resources, how to publish, write grants, how to communicate, how to manage others and manage a research laboratory. These are things our education does not necessarily teach us. Sally Chapman, longtime chemistry professor at Barnard College, told me, "I do remember talking sometimes to graduate students who really felt frustrated that their advisor wasn't mentoring them well enough, wasn't pushing. I'd say, well, all right, go find somebody else. I mean, your advisor, what you want from your advisor is to be doing great science. If we could figure out ways where people could get the different kinds of support they needed from different people and felt comfortable that way, I think it works better." Scientific advisors and mentors are not necessarily the same thing. And for most of us, they definitely aren't the same thing. What we want from a scientific advisor is to learn science. But a scientific career has so much more in it than just science. And that's where mentors come into play. So the question is, how do we learn how to be confident? How do we learn all the skills that we need? We learn from mentors. We learn from peers. It used to be that men learned these things through the old boys club. I've had a number of women tell me about their old girls club, their old girls network. We learn through informal and formal networks and professional networks like AWES. But we learn through countless other ways and interactions. You can find mentors online now. I've had interviewees talk to me about their experiences mentoring online. There are so many ways that we can learn about the skills that we need, and that's part of the reason that we're all here today. Geraldine Richmond, chemistry professor at the University of Oregon and founder of the professional networking organization COACH, Committee on the Advancement of Women in Chemistry, told me, "You want to make sure that you invest your energy in things that you really value, and make sure that you're not investing in what other people value that you don't. Make certain that you plan for your life to evolve with time. Think beyond the job you are in now. Is this where you want to be in 10 years? Is this where you want to be in 20 years? And we normally as women don't necessarily think about that. We need confidence to succeed. We need skills to succeed. But we need to figure out all the things that we really want to succeed in. Where do we want to be in 10 years and 20 years? How do we want to balance our life and career? What do we want our career to look like? But of course, the problem with trying to figure that out is that a scientific career is not just about science. There are so many other things you're expected to do. And that doesn't even start in on the question of how you balance that career with the rest of your life. Amy Newman at NIH NIDA explained to me about one of the problems she has allocating one of the most important resources, her time. The problem is that there are not 50% women in higher positions. So a lot of us end up being overburdened by the requirement of having a woman on a committee. I'm a great example, and I don't mean great in a good way, because people know that I'm a woman scientist. I participate actively. I typically do a good job when asked to participate in these committees, and so when there's something to be done, Amy Newman's name comes to the top. You get pulled into meetings, you get pulled into committees, you get pulled in so many directions, and your scientific career may, at the end of the day, look like you're doing very little science. But that's the career. And like I said, that doesn't even get to the question of how we balance the rest of our life. Now, we all want a successful career. It's what we work hard for in school, and it's why we come to meetings like this, to figure out how to have that successful career. And despite all of the other obligations outside of pure science that we're asked to do, and outside all of the things in our life, our family, our friends, our hobbies, our pets, all of those things that we take just as seriously and probably more seriously, in the end, our career is about science. Cynthia Burrows at the University of Utah explained, "We wanted to be judged on our science and not on other personal issues. We didn't want that to become a factor in the tenure decision." We establish careers through confidence and skills. We learn those confidence and skills through a variety of places, through networks, through peers, through the examples of others, through the mistakes that we make ourselves. The way that we succeed is varied and complicated, but all of the women that I've interviewed have been able to find success in different locations in different ways, and I hope that everyone in this room is able to find success as well. The Women in Chemistry Oral History Project is continuing. It's an ongoing project, and I hope to be able to interview at least 8 more women by next July. I'm still very interested in understanding different avenues to success at the different locations of industry, academia, and national laboratories. But I've expanded my goals. I want to look not just at women who began their careers in the 1970s and later, not just that Title IX generation. I also want to look at women who were educated outside of the United States. I want to make sure that I'm trying to understand how globalization of science works, how it affects women in chemistry and related sciences, and what it means for those women who are educated and work outside of the United States. I also want to look more closely at interdisciplinary sciences, the sciences related to chemistry. I tried to pick interviewees initially who worked in chemistry departments, but I want to look now at the related sciences, material sciences, biochemistry, and all things that verge on chemistry. So there are many ways in which the project is expanding, and I very much hope that I again have an opportunity to speak with you about this project, hopefully the next time in person. Again, I apologize for not being there in person to answer your questions, and I encourage you to email me with any questions that you might have about interviewees, the projects, anything about the oral history program generally, or what we use these oral histories for. Please remember that I'll be slow to answer as I'm on maternity leave, but I will answer your questions if you email me. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoy your day.